Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm showing you a very old-fashioned cake that is now new again. It's called a chiffon cake. It's a style of sponge. It's kind of an all-purpose cake that you can use in any number of applications, but I'm going to show you kind of a straightforward tube cake version, which is a classic. I helped out a really wonderful family in Brooklyn by recreating a beloved cake that their family has lost from a now closed bakery. And this is the cake, and I tried it and I was like, this is a good cake. So that's what we're going to make today. I got an email a few months ago from the producer of a podcast hosted by Alex Goldman called HyperFixed. HyperFixed is a podcast about kind of like solving people's dilemmas. They were contacting me because they were in touch with a listener who had written in about this like problem the family was having because as a family lives in Brooklyn, and Rebecca is sort of the daughter of this family. She wrote in because her family had always gotten a very, very specific cake from a bakery in Brooklyn called Lord's Bakery, which closed a year or two ago. And all of a sudden, like, their family no longer had access to this cake that was the cake to celebrate like every single family occasion of any kind for decades. You know, the podcast actually tried to like reach out to the bakery and find someone who worked there, and like we're just coming up with nothing. It was just dead end after dead end. And so finally they reached out to me being like, we think the only hope to like get something to this family to replace the cake that they lost is to like basically like tap somebody to recreate it. The project was like talk to Rebecca and her mom, Hope, get some info about the cake, and try to recreate it. So this is the result of my testing and efforts, and you will have to listen to the podcast to see how it turned out. The cake that is the base of this beloved cake is a chiffon cake. And it's a style of cake I've made a lot. It's a great sponge cake. It's actually a cake that's really old-fashioned, that has had kind of like a renaissance in the world of, you know, cool, innovative new bakeries. There's tons of different versions of it. I'm showing the most kind of like plain version that's just flavored with a little bit of vanilla. In some versions I've seen the milk, which is a liquid component, which is something you don't see much in sponge cakes, can be replaced with like orange juice or another kind of liquid. Ingredients, let's talk about those. I'm using cake flour. That's really important to the overall texture of the cake. It is a cake that is very flexible and very tender. So cake flour is a must. There is granulated sugar that I'm dividing, incorporated in two ways into the batter. I have 7 egg yolks, some neutral oil. Chiffon famously is a cake that uses oil rather than butter, but it is a kind of enriched sponge cake. A little vanilla extract. This is a cup of whole milk. Then I have salt and baking powder. So notably, as opposed to a lot of other kinds of sponge cakes, which are lightened by egg whites, this also adds a leavener. Then over here, I have my egg whites. It's 10 whites and 7 yolks, so you need a few extra eggs, and some cream of tartar, which helps to stabilize the egg whites so you get this really sturdy, tall cake. Special equipment. I'm using a stand mixer with a whisk attachment because whipping 10 egg whites is not something I ever want to do by hand. And you have to whip very, very, very stiff egg whites. That's a really important part of this recipe. It's really key to the texture. So definitely a stand mixer. And then I have a large bowl behind me with a whisk because we do the batter in 2 stages. And so I am baking this in a tube pan. When I did this for the podcast, the Solomon family's cake was a layer cake. So I baked the same recipe, same quantities of everything in 3 9-inch cake pans. I want to show you a really nice little tool. This is a little metal core that you can put in the middle of a cake pan. This one got a little bit bent. But basically it sits on the bottom of the cake pan and it heats up. So this helps to create a sort of domed or flat cake that doesn't sink in the middle, because a lot of sponge cakes are so light they'll collapse under their own weight. So here I'm using a tube pan which has like this big center core. This helps to create a cake that's like lofty and stable and doesn't collapse. But if you're baking in a thinner layer with more surface area, then one of these is really handy. So I baked with these for the layers. The point is I'm making everything in a tube pan. Now there's one issue that I want to address here, which is that this is a non-stick tube pan, which like should not exist. It doesn't really make sense because so much of what you bake in a tube pan is a sponge cake, and sponge cakes need friction with the sides of the pan in order to rise and to like cling to the sides so they don't collapse. So if you were to try to, for instance, bake an angel food cake, which is like a famous style of sponge cake, in a nonstick pan, the whole thing collapses. So it's tricky, and it's also a dark color. You don't really want that. You want like a light colored aluminum pan. I don't know how or why I have this, but we're gonna use it. And my hack for using this is I'm gonna put some foil around the sides and the tube so that the cake doesn't collapse. Now, under normal circumstances, what I love about a sponge cake, especially this one, is that you don't have to grease the pan at all. The whole point, again, as I said, is to have that friction with the sides. In my mind, it makes the recipe easier because it's like, oh, I don't have to, I can just pour the whole thing into like a pan. I don't have to prep it or do anything. No greasing, no parchment. So I have my oven on 325. Make sure you have enough room because the tube pan is nice and tall. So I'm gonna start with my cake flour in here. Then I'm gonna add to that my salt and my baking powder. Chiffon is a little unusual in that it is kind of a hybrid of a classic sponge cake, which is like leavened only with eggs and, you know, doesn't have like added liquid to it, and a butter cake, which has all of those things. Not to mention a sort of higher proportion of fat. This is sugar. This is about a third of the total amount of sugar. This is gonna go in here as well. So whisk all of that. And now I'm gonna make a well in the center. So now I'm going to add basically all of my sources of fat and liquid. I'm gonna add my 7 egg yolks. Then my oil. This is 3/4 of a cup of neutral oil. You could do like an olive oil variation and use olive oil. To me, the flavor doesn't read. So like, it's kind of like, what's the point of using olive oil, which is more expensive? And then I'm gonna add about half of the milk, just a little bit of it. And I'm gonna start to whisk. Now the point of this step is to get all the flour kind of coated in some of the fat. This helps to create a really, really tender sponge cake. So I start whisking from the center and move outward. So once I have the flour mostly hydrated, I'm gonna add the remaining milk. And then 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So at this step, this is where you would want to add any other flavorings to the cake. So if you were doing like a citrus version, very often you see like a lemon chiffon or orange chiffon cake, you can take citrus zest and like massage it into the sugar and start the recipe there. I'm just adding a little vanilla. You could do other extracts. You could do like almond extract and do an almond cake. There's a lot of different options here. And then of course you can play around with a liquid. So like I said, sometimes you find that it's like a fruit juice that's added, a lemon juice or an orange juice, and those are ways to get flavorings into the cake. The other thing about a sponge cake is that the whole point is that you're supposed to soak it. That's the other option, is after it's baked. You could do like a coffee soak or other fruit. I'm gonna serve it today with a little macerated fruit, so like it will soak up the juices from that. So we want this to be very smooth, no lumps. I am going to set this aside and I'm gonna start to whip my egg whites. One thing you'll see if in a recipe that's like a meringue sometimes, or anything where you're whipping egg whites, often you'll see the instruction to gradually add the sugar, and I've written a ton of recipes where that's what you want to do. It kind of sets up the expectation that like if you add the sugar all at once, it's not going to whip. That's not really the case. If you add the sugar and the egg whites together in the very beginning, what ends up happening is you make a foam that is more finely textured. So you make a foam with smaller air bubbles, and that's actually what we want here. I don't want a cake that has like a mixture of like big air pockets and small ones. I want a nice uniform texture. So I'm gonna take all 10 egg whites, add them to my mixing bowl. Make sure that your mixing bowl and the whisk attachment are really clean. Otherwise, if there's any fat residue, it inhibits the whipping of the egg whites. This is cream of tartar. So cream of tartar is an acid. This helps to stabilize the egg whites as they whip. When I say stabilize, it means that it helps them to hold onto the air and like not collapse. And then I'm gonna add all of my remaining sugar. If you don't have cream of tartar, you could give it like a squeeze of lemon juice. So I'm gonna start whipping this. And this is a process where I wanna take my time. The most stable foam comes from a kind of slower, longer whip. And also it works best if your eggs are room temp. So I'm gonna start it off on kind of medium-low, and I'll increase the speed gradually. I'm going to whip this until the egg whites are very, very, very firm. That's so crucial to the final texture of the cake and to getting a light sponge that doesn't collapse. it gets a lot of structure from those egg whites, and so they need to be very, very firmly whipped. That was a real kind of discovery of the process of making this cake, is I think that like a lot of times in the past when I've made chiffon, I have not whipped the egg whites enough. If you take the chiffon cake and you bake it in a sheet tray, this becomes a wonderful base for like a bûche à Noël, because it's a really flexible, light sponge, and so it rolls up really well. I think that an orange chiffon cake would actually be like, the classic would be a great holiday recipe. Orange, to me, if you like add like a little clove or something, that to me really speaks holiday. The layer cake that I made for the Solomon family is kind of like a really celebratory cake because it's 3 layers, and so it's nice and tall. I made it in a 9-inch cake. That version has a chocolate buttercream and a chocolate glaze. If you wanted to make a kind of like tiramisu inspired cake, you could do like a coffee soak with a little mascarpone frosting and a little sprinkle of cocoa powder on top. That would be really good. So now that the egg whites are starting to get foamy and a little opaque, I'm increasing the speed. So now it's on medium. And as they continue to whip, I'm gonna turn it up until I get to basically high. Okay, so here are the egg whites. They're still glossy, but they have developed a slightly matte texture. They are very, very stiff. You can see that like there is no settling onto the surface. When I lift up the whisk, I get a very stiff peak that stands straight up. You see that without flopping over. And there's even some egg white that gathers like inside the whisk. So that's how you know that you have beaten them sufficiently. I'm gonna pop this out of the mixer. And in general, you just have this very, very stiff, very dense foam. So whipping egg whites this firm, it is both a help and a hindrance because you need them this firm to help the cake support itself, but egg whites whipped this stiff can be difficult to incorporate. So I'm actually going to take a third of the mixture and add it to my batter base. And the batter base itself is pretty thick. So I actually do the first addition of egg whites with a whisk. And this just kind of works everything together more efficiently. And yeah, you end up deflating it a little bit, but the first addition is just to lighten the batter enough that I can fold the rest of it in more gently. So once that first addition is mostly incorporated, you don't have to work it fully in because we're gonna just keep mixing. I'm gonna add the second addition, about half of the remainder, third of the total. And now I'm going to fold with the spatula. And you want to just be careful that you're not getting any kind of big lumps of unincorporated egg white. I would say it's better to err on the side of less mixing and risk a couple of like pockets of egg white than to overmix, but just try to do your best. The batter is now already like so light. So now, same thing. Once I just have a few streaks, I'm gonna add the last of the egg whites. So when you're folding, you wanna use big strokes, and you can see I'm using a large, flexible spatula. And folding is the process of taking what's on the bottom and bringing it to the top. But as you're doing that, you're also cutting through the mixture so that you're not just like moving the same parts of the batter the whole time. So like I just saw a little pocket of egg white and I'm just like gently stirring that to break it up. So you want to stop mixing once it's almost entirely streak free, and then that's it. You don't really want to go past that because mixing too much, even though we have really nice stable egg whites, mixing too much will deflate it a little bit. So this batter is ready to go. I'm going to get it into my pan. Is this too much batter for the pan?
We're going to find out together.
We're going to find out. I don't really want to fill the pan more than 3/4 of the way. As it turns out, I have a little excess batter. I can bake the excess batter in just like a little ramekin or something. When it comes to sponge, because I'm trying to get a uniform crumb, I will give the pan one sharp tap on the countertop to burst some of the larger bubbles that are rising to the surface. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Maybe one more. Okay, so now into the oven. So we want to bake the sponge until it's risen. It's going to be even kind of like cracked along the surface, nice and puffed up, golden brown, and a cake tester inserted into the tallest part of the cake. It comes out clean. One thing people asked about in the comments is what is in our tap, and it is not beer, it's actually kombucha. We get it from this local company called Feel Good Booch, and it's just so awesome to have. Not beer, it's booch, not beer. So this cake has been baking for a while. It's gone in for over an hour, but I think it's done. So I'm gonna pull it out. I'll do a quick cake test just to make sure. This is one where you want a skewer or a cake tester. A toothpick isn't long enough because the cake is really tall. So we're gonna test it in the tallest part of the cake and just make sure it's done. It's risen like up over the side of the tube pan. I can hear it, like little tiny air bubbles popping. All right, it's done. That came out clean. Now we need to cool it upside down. So this is where oh my God, is this whole thing gonna fall out? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The whole thing's falling out. Nope. We're just gonna have to let it cool right side up.
What do you think you were gonna do with the wine bottle?
It was gonna sit over the neck of the wine bottle. Have you ever seen that before?
No.
It's gonna go like this. But literally the whole thing is falling out. See, it's already deflating.
Is that good or bad?
That's not good. That's bad. It's not good. It's not good. But it doesn't matter actually because it has to cling to the sides in order for the cooling upside down to even matter. Because otherwise it'll just sit onto itself and it's the same as cooling it right side up. I'm literally watching it deflate. I can't turn it upside down because the foil is coming out.
You've been foiled.
I've been foiled. Vince, can you grab me a cooling rack from up there, please? Thank you. The inverting is not gonna work. I was foiled by the foil. Didn't even work. Probably should have left it uncovered. So the cake deflated a little bit. I'm not able to cool it upside down because the whole thing literally will fall out. But I think it's relatively stable now, and we're just gonna let it cool right side up and come back and take it out and try it. But ideally, use a better pan, cool it upside down. Some of the tube pans have little feet because you do the same thing with Angel Food where you turn it over and it like elevates it off the counter a little bit. So do that. This will be fine. So my cake lost a little bit of volume, but not that bad. I would say if I had to give it I would say a 10%. Not too bad. Still an A-. So we're gonna take it out of the tube pan. With a regular tube pan that doesn't have the foil, you would cut around the outside to loosen it, but we don't really have to do that here. So you wanna tug from the center. Actually, this is kinda nice. I don't have to clean my pan. And you can see the cake is so nice and tall. So I'm just gonna peel away. The foil did kind of do what I wanted it to do. You can see that there's this film that's stuck to the foil, but that it peels away really easily. This is what's so nice about sponge cakes, is like it doesn't need to be greased, and you can just peel away or cut away the cake. It's like very, very satisfying. Same thing in a regular pan, you would then cut around the outside of the tube in the center. But here again, we have the foil. Oh my God. Okay, so now I have to cut around the bottom of the cake. So I'm just using, you can use like a butter knife, this is, or a paring knife. This is a little offset spatula. So now we're going to invert it. Take the tube out. And this is actually the nicer side for serving. See the wobble? It's so light for its size. This looks great. These are some blackberries that I just macerated with a little bit of sugar and lemon juice, and I'm gonna whip a little cream and we're gonna cut into it and serve it. I'm gonna cut a slice. It's so light and fluffy. If you are someone that really likes Angel Food Cake, I would say give Chiffon Cake a try because it's like richer. Even though it had that little bit of like deflating, the crumb is still so fluffy and light and tender and bouncy. Even though it's a really tall cake from top to bottom, like super even crumb. Sometimes what happens when a cake collapses or is underbaked, like you get a line of like compressed, kind of squidgy, underbaked at the bottom. That didn't happen. So I'm actually gonna do blackberries right on top so that the juices can kind of soak into the crumb a little bit. And then some whipped cream on top. It's really not so sweet. It has the richness like a butter cake. It has the lightness of a sponge cake. The crumb is super tender, but it also has a heft to it, which is what makes it great for like filling and stacking. And it's just a really wonderful cake. And I'm glad that it's kind of like having a little bit of a resurgence in layer cakes, and I think we should bring it back. I want to thank Alex and Amor and the Solomon family. Check out the HyperFixed podcast. It was really fun. It's kind of got me thinking about this idea of like lost family recipes, which is a thread I might pull on a little bit. So maybe more about that in a little bit. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.